Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Mass. Playing live over Discord. Brian on Demir Thopter Sword, Matt on Bug Food Chain. This is a spicy matchup right here. And we will see how this goes, as it looks like Brian, mulling down to just 4 to begin, has an Ancient Tomb and passing the turn. Misty Rainforest from Matt. And now an Underground Sea. Leading out with Emery, a card that can definitely make up for lost card advantage. You see Seed of the Synod as an artifact going to the graveyard. And Brainstorm plus Fetch Land, Matt assembling the best combo in the game. Just actually gets stuff done. And now Emery bringing back Mox Opal. It's really an underplayed card in a sense. I mean, it's not that there's a ton of decks that would be running it. Emery getting KO'd by Abrupt Decay. And a Karn, and that's a dangerous spell here. That's going to merit Force of Will, happily pitching Mist Hollow Griffin. And now Bauble shows a Brainstorm on the way. Looking to contain Brian. He's throwing some bombs out there. Food Chain. And it looks like Matt's pretty much ready to just straight up win the game on his turn. We've got a Tezzeret. And he's going to turn sideways and smash for 5. Trying to close this thing out as quickly as possible, but Matt's going to have infinite mana. We're going to have Baleful Strix drawing a card. And just going to be able to exile that for 3 mana. And now the Mist Hollow Griffin coming in. And the Walking Ballista is already there, so that is it. So for those unfamiliar, Mist Hollow Griffin going to be able to be cast repeatedly as you exile it to Food Chain, and it can be cast from exile. So it exiles for 5 mana, only cost 4 to cast. So you're actually netting 1 mana on each iteration, resulting in an arbitrarily large amount of mana, say 1 billion, trillion, whatever. I guess let me know in the comments what number you like to go with. And then cast your Walking Ballista for that amount of mana. And of course, it enters with that many counters to be removed to eliminate players, creatures, planeswalkers, whatever you want. They're all dead, as you can do as much damage as you like. And that is what Food Chain is looking to do. Really a hugely significant printing is the Walking Ballista. There's been a lot of them in recent years. I mean, Magic's such an incredible game. Because of those constant interactions and the ways that the history of the game just builds upon itself to create just awesome decks and board states and situations that can happen. And Walking Ballista, one of those cards that really rejuvenated Food Chain. I think Eternal Scourge, of course, was a really nice printing for the deck as well, getting that curve to be a little bit lower. So when you use Manipulate Fate, you can remove an Eternal Scourge and 2 Mist Hollow Griffins, enabling you to ramp right in from Baleful Strix, or, even just Living the Dream, go from Noble Hierarch or Birds of Paradise, whatever option you're running, into your Baleful Strix, and then your Eternal Scourge for infinite mana, and then your Mist Hollow Griffins which are also sometimes needed, to be fair. Like, sometimes you actually do just win by getting out a squad of birds and just ride them to victory. They're very difficult to deal with. You can just exile them in response to any type of removal spell, and then just cast them again the next turn. More often than not, what you'll do is you'll attack with them all, then exile them, and then cast them again post-combat. And in terms of, I think this is a expedition that I don't immediately recognize. Fetching for Baleful Strix. Yeah, Birds of Paradise versus Noble Hierarch. Definitely a little bit of a consideration for the deck. Birds can tap for the black for Baleful Strix, though some people are going with Ice Fang over Baleful Strix, keeping it more blue-green. The black, of course, has plenty of power to it in this format. And Grafdigger's Cage, I don't know if that's going to do very much in this matchup. Maybe I'm missing something there. I feel like the sword... Does that... I don't think that stops the sword, does it? And a Force of Will stopping Tezzeret, who would eventually either pull the combo together or just kill your opponent with enough artifacts in play. I don't know what that Grafdigger's Cage is going to stop. And Sylvan Library, that is a very dangerous card. Force of Negation on that. Not losing the life, losing a Force of Will. So a couple of high-quality cards down there. And now Urza. And this would perhaps indicate that Brian could have fought over that Tezzeret. And Plague Engineer showing up, wiping out those Birds of Paradise. That's a significant swing. But Matt may not need to worry about that much. This is a reason to perhaps run the Ice Fang. Is Ice Fang a bird snake? I don't even know. I gotta look that up. Food Chain has resolved, making this a dangerous board state. And Urza spinning the wheel. We'll see what he gets. Yeah, Ice Fang's just a snake. Wouldn't surprise me if it was a bird snake, though. Does have wings. Alright, everything turning sideways, getting aggressive. It's Matthew's life total under assault. Spinning the wheel again. Urza's already bringing so much to the table. You got a construct, a decent body on his own, but then on top of it, just continuing to add card advantage. It is a very dangerous card, and one that we don't see very much of in Legacy. Certainly Legacy power level, but just isn't really played that much. Both of these decks are excellent examples of the crazy potential that exists in this format. There's just so many amazing decks that can be played. And a lot of the time people are drawn towards Delver strategies. I think they're a little bit easier to play in the short term, and they do often give you a lot of free wins, but there's really something to be said for kind of gaining a expertise with a particular deck in the format and knowing matchups inside and out. I mean, you can pretty much guarantee if you get incredibly good with either of these decks, for example, that you're going to know the matchups far better than your opponent. So when you sit down against Bug Delver or Rug Delver or Blue Red Delver or Death and Taxes, any of the more commonly played decks, for sure you've gotten way more reps against their decks than they have against you. And there's something to be said for that. There's so much decision making in this game That can be the difference between winning and losing. So Brian picking up that first game. Looks like he's going to be mulling. We can skip over that. All right, Underground C4 Matt. And an Ancient Tomb into Urza's Bauble, Mox Opal, and a Chalice at 1. A Brainstorm for Matt in response. It's now or never with this Brainstorm. Cutting off the low rung of the mana curve is pretty devastating. And a main reason to run these Soulland mana bases, Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, the Moxes like Mox Opal, Chrome Mox. There's a whole bunch of different stompy decks that take great use of having that first turn Chalice of the Void. Now many of those also run Elvish Spirit Guide or Simian Spirit Guide, or in some cases both. But just that consistency of that turn 1 Chalice can be really backbreaking. It's often dangerous to actually play Chalice at 2, just because if your opponent does have some type of way of dealing with the Chalice at 1 in response, you can actually lock yourself out of getting another Chalice at 1, which is often the most crucial lock piece, potentially shutting off 50% or more of the spells in some decks. Oko, and he sees a Force of Will. Now, Oko is an incredibly important printing as far as Legacy goes, largely because he gives answers in decks that didn't always have answers in the past. A card like Chalice at 1, you just kind of have to suck it up and deal, hope that you draw what you need. Now with Oko, you're actually able to clear a Chalice out of the way with a card that you're totally happy playing as well. It's not like you had to sideboard in a Echoing Truth or a Hurkyl's Recall or something. This is just straight up quality Magic card doing what it's made to do, and just so happens to answer any type of permanence that your opponent has. Well, artifacts and creatures. Enchantments still have quite a lot of shine to them. And looks like Matt exiling a land and an Eternal Scourge with Manipulate Fate. I'm actually surprised by this. I would expect the Mist Hollow Griffins, are they all in his hand? Like, I'm having a tough time imagining why that went the way it did. Mist Hollow Griffins can just be cast from exile as part of a beatdown plan, even if you don't get a food chain to stick. A Brainstorm here for Matt. And now a Sylvan Library with a shuffle effect. It's a dangerous duo. And in this type of matchup, don't be surprised if Matt uses his life aggressively to get extra cards. We did see a beatdown with Urza. But the Thopter deck not necessarily going to punish you for using your life total. Doesn't... I mean, there are some instances when we got that Tezzeret that can potentially hit you. So you don't want to go too low and give your opponent a bunch of outs, but if you can leverage some advantage here, it's going to be very welcome, because you do not want this Thopter deck to hang around too long. It will be able to grind you out. A hardcast Force of Will on this food chain, which does represent lethal, or does represent infinite mana. The Eternal Scourge is already in the graveyard, so if Matt could have fought over that, believe he would have. Looks like Brian down to just one card in hand, as he is flooded out with mana, and the Sylvan Library threatening to just bury him with card advantage. We've got another shuffle available. Baleful Strix continues to chip away, but not likely going to be super relevant here. And now Eternal Scourge joins in. And this is where I'd like to see those other Mist Hologriffins just coming in turn after turn. I mean, that would ramp up pretty quickly. We've got a Thopter Foundry. And this can potentially slow things down a little bit. Force it negation. Ooh, that's an excellent reply. Though interesting that he didn't hard cast it. Let's see what he's going to use his existing mana for. Boy, I'll tell you, that feels like probably could have got away with just hard casting Force and Negation. Though I guess he did exile a Mist Hologriffin is what I'm seeing, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. I suppose you'd actually rather have the Mist Holo in exile, as it can't be stripped from your hand with a discard effect. Not that that's going to be a thing on Brian's side of the board. Toxic Deluge clearing the board. And Emery going to show up in mill 4, and we'll see some possibilities. Plague Engineer. Luckily that can't come back with Emery. Just going to be artifacts. It's an incredibly strong printing. Yeah, Commander Legends, I haven't even really digested any of the new cards that might see play in Legacy. I haven't really thought about it too much. Though I am curious if they'll eventually unban Mana Drain. I don't know if it would be that big a deal. It could be really good. Or it could be just fine. Tough to say. I wouldn't mind it, at least for a while, like unbanning it with a caveat that it's only going to be for 3 months or something. We've got a Drown in the lock, taking out this Leovold. And now Emery. Oh, did she just attack for 1? Okay. I was thinking she was going to use her activated ability, though I don't know what Brian has left in the graveyard that could come back. I mean, worst case scenario with a Bauble, she's just going to be... Well, you can't cast them with Grafdigger's Cage. So it is actually going to stop Emery, right? Because the Thopter Sword, you're not actually casting anything. But this should stop Emery. Let me check. Plague Engineer showing up, making birds a little smaller. It's not a bad measure before Mist Hologriffin comes online, because it is actually shutting off Birds of Paradise and Baleful Strix for Matt. But Sylvan's continuing to dig, and if it finds a food chain, this could be over in the blink of an eye. And that is going to do it for game number 2. Is Mist Hologriffin actually doesn't even need the infinite damage. Oh, that was a quick game in between there. So that's actually game 3. Sorry about that, guys. So food chain, actually taking that down in 3, that quick walking ballista kill, just didn't mark it. Totally forgot about it as food chain. Beth's Demir Thopter Sword in a very interesting match of Legacy. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.